Hello everyone. In today's lecture, all of you are going to learn a very different way of using your computer. The topic for today's lecture is the terminal. If you have already gone through my Python installation videos, you would have observed that I used a terminal for the Mac installation video and a PowerShell for the Windows installation video. Today's lecture is going to be all about learning how to use the terminal. Let me get started by giving you a brief history about the terminal. In the early days, organizations used to spend millions of dollars in order to purchase a powerful computing machinery called as the mainframe. When you're investing such high amounts of money, you would like multiple people in your organization to be able to use such a machinery, correct? So how did they share the mainframe computer? They used to purchase what are called as dumb terminals. These terminals used to be text based. They just had a keyboard and a monitor, but they used to be able to connect to the mainframe computer in order to perform computational tasks. So what would be the equivalent of these dumb terminals in today's laptops? That is something which is called as terminal emulator. So you might be wondering, why exactly should we learn how to use a terminal? Let me give you a twofold reason for that. The first reason is that working with a keyboard is way faster than working on a mouse. In order to use a terminal emulator, you only need to work on your keyboard. Here is a good career tip for you. Invest in learning tools which will make you faster in the long run. Even though you might be unfamiliar with these tools right now, spending time for learning such useful tools might come in handy to save a lot of your precious time in the future. The second reason for using a terminal is because terminals not only enable you to run commands on your local laptop, but they also enable you to connect to a remote computer. For example, let's say that you want to connect to a computer science department lab machine in order to run some programs. Terminal can enable you to do that. Here is career tip number 2. Master the tools which will let you work from anywhere. Working from home has become a norm now because of COVID. In the future, wouldn't it be nicer if we can work from a beach? Let's learn about what is called as the shell. Shell is a program that runs inside the terminal emulator. People often mix up terminal and shell. Shell is a different program from the terminal itself. Let's talk more about shells. Shell is this awesome program which just simply keeps asking you what is the next command to run. You will have these prompts which will keep prompting you to enter the next command. It just keeps asking, what should I do next? What should I do next? And so on. There are two major tasks that you can perform with the shell program. The first one is navigation. Navigation is digging through folders and files and accessing your data inside folders and files. The second task that you can perform is you can run specific programs within the shell program. Let me introduce a different terminology for the term folder. The most commonly used terminology for folder is something which is called as directories. We'll be using the term directories from now on. There are a lot of examples of shells that you can potentially use. Let me discuss about some of these examples. Let's first talk about a Windows platform. Windows platform has a couple of shell options like the command shell, CMD, or the PowerShell. What about Mac platforms and Linux platforms? Mac platforms typically use what is called as the Z shell. Mac used to use Bash shell, but they recently changed the default shell to Z shell. The most famous shell is the Bash shell. Let me briefly tell you how the Bash shell was invented. Originally in 1979, Bone Shell invented what is called as the initial shell, and then later on they reinvented the same shell and called it as Born Again Shell, hence the name BASH, sort of a pun. Let's talk about what sort of programs you can run from within the shell program. Let me introduce a set of terminologies for you first. Inside your terminal window, you should be able to see something which is called as the prompt, which is the text that appears on a regular basis. After that, you should be able to type in a program name. An example of a program name would be ls, which is a program which enables you to list all the directories and files. Let me give you more details about the terminology that I just used. So what is a prompt? The text that appears before the program name is called as the prompt. Notice that after the program execution is done, the prompt appears one more time. So the shell keeps prompting you to enter the next command or the next program name. ls is the name of the program, and the lines that follow after that is the output of that particular program. Let's talk about navigation. Navigation is all about poking around directories and files in order to find the data that you're looking for. I'm sure all of you are familiar with how to navigate your laptop. If you own a Mac laptop, you might be using something called as the Finder in order to be able to poke around your directories and files. The equivalent of the Finder application on a Windows laptop would be the File Explorer application, which allows you to perform the same tasks. In this new world where we will be using terminal a lot, we are going to learn a lot of useful commands which will enable you to navigate through the directory and file structure on your laptop. We'll be going through most of these commands in the upcoming slides and in the demo that follows after that. Let's talk about how files and directories are organized in the Windows platform. You might be familiar with the fact that there are drives inside a Windows laptop. Each of those drives might represent a specific hard disk that is connected to your laptop. Let's say that we have a couple of hard disks which are called as C drive and D drive, and you have an SSD which is called as an E drive. Let's learn about the file naming format. I'm going to introduce to you a lot of terminology in the next couple of slides. Every file has a name which is called as the file name. In order to be able to tell the complete location of a particular file name, I'm going to introduce to you a term called as the path name. The path name provides all the details that you need in order to be able to navigate to a particular file. For example, this particular readme.txt file is inside C drive. The C in this path name indicates the drive letter, and the .txt which comes after the file name is something which is called as the extension of the file. The backslash which separates the drive name and the file name is called as the separator. So one thing which is very different between Windows platform and Mac platform is that Windows uses a backslash, whereas Mac uses a forward slash. We'll be taking a look at examples of path names on a Mac platform shortly. Let's talk about input and output here for a minute. Files are often used as input to your program, and you will also be able to write output from your program to a particular file. Let's say that you're opening a particular file from the file system and you're doing something with the data that you read from that file inside your program. And after your manipulation, you want to be able to write the updated data back to the same file or another file. Files are very handy when it comes to running programs on your computer. Let's talk more about directories. Directories enable you to organize files and other directories. Just like a file name has a path name, a directory also has a path name. Let's take a look at some examples for that. Here is a directory called my-directory, which contains 3 different files, file1.docx, 2.docx, and so on. If you were to mention the path name for each of those files, you'll be mentioning the drive letter, which is C colon. Following that, you'll have a backslash as a separator, then the directory name, which is my-directory. Then you'll have another backslash to separate the directory name from the actual file name, which is file1.docx. The .docx is the extension of this particular file. You don't have to essentially have unique names for your directories. For example, you can have a directory called same-dir inside another directory called same-dir. We will be able to differentiate between these two directories because the path name for both of those directories will be different. You can have a directory inside a directory, just like you can have files inside directories. So let's talk about 2 different types of paths next. So far, all the examples for path names that I've been giving are something which is called as absolute paths. So let's talk about what is meant by relative paths. Let me give you a real world example for that. Let's say that you're new to Madison and you're trying to find the location of the computer sciences building. Here are a couple of potential answers for such a question. Answer 1 is stating that computer sciences building is at 1210 West Dayton Street, Madison. Answer 2 is stating that it is on the other side of Johnson Street. When do you think answer 2 is appropriate? It's appropriate when you are in the same vicinity of the Johnson Street, correct? So answer 1 here is equivalent of absolute path names in a computer. Answer 2 is an equivalent of relative path names in a computer. So let's define both of those. Absolute path names will give you the full navigation structure from the entire drive, whereas relative paths give you the navigation structure relative to your current location, and the current location has a specific term called as the working directory. Let's try and understand absolute path and relative path using few examples. I have 4 examples here where I've given absolute paths in the first column. The second column mentions the working directory, which is the current directory. Assume that you're inside the working directory. Let's take a look at how to define relative path for these absolute paths. Since I'm inside C drive here, if I want to access the file test.txt, I can simply say test.txt and that will be the relative path for that. The next example is showing that you're inside C drive X, Y, Z folders and you want to be able to access my.docx, right? You can simply say my.docx in that case. What would happen if you were inside X directory and Y directory and you want to access z/my.docx? you'll have to say the relative path is z slash my.docx. Relative paths can be applied to directories as well. So if you're currently inside C drive X directory, if you want to access Y and Z directory in the path navigation, you should say your relative path is Y slash Z. So relative path totally depends on where your current working directory is. Let me introduce to you a couple of special directory names. The first one is the double dot. The double dot enables you to go to the parent directory. The current directory is where your working directory is. The parent directory is the previous one in your path name. The next special directory name is dot, which refers to just the current working directory itself. I'll give you example of how to use the dot reference as part of the later on demo. Let's go through more examples with these special characters, which are dot and dot dot. Let's say that my current working directory is inside C drive and I want to access test.txt. I should be able to simply say dot slash test.txt as well. The dot is mentioning the fact that I am talking about the current working directory. Let's say the working directory is inside the C drive X and we want to be able to access Y slash Z. I can say dot slash Y slash Z. What about your current working directory being C colon X slash Y slash Z? What if you want to access C colon X instead? Keep in mind that your two directories away from the X directory in the directory tree. So you'll have to go out of the Z directory and then you'll have to go out of the Y directory in order to be able to go back to the X directory. So that would be dot dot slash dot dot. Let's go through one more example. So your current working directory is inside C drive A directory and you want to be able to access C drive B directory file.txt. So first of all, you need to get out of A, so that's going to be a dot dot, and then you need to get into B, so it's going to be a slash B and then slash file.txt. This last example is a little bit tricky, so I have a diagrammatic visualization for that. So your current working directory denoted by CWD is inside the A. Both A and B directories are inside C drive. You want to be able to get out of A and then go into the B directory to be able to access file.txt, right? So dot dot takes you outside A directory and then the B access takes you inside the B directory and then you need to provide slash file.txt. We'll go through some more examples as part of the demo for this lecture. Let me quickly talk about Windows versus Mac differences. As I previously mentioned, Windows uses backward slash as the separator, whereas Mac uses forward slash as the separator. In Windows, absolute paths start with drive name. Mac doesn't use drive names. You'll only have folders from the beginning of the path name. So let's try and understand the difference between Windows path names and Mac path names by going through some examples. Just like the previous example, let's assume that we have one SSD and a couple of hard disks. As I mentioned, each of those storage devices might have a different drive name when it comes to Windows laptop. And then after that, you can have any number of directories and file names. So how can you differentiate between various disk drives on a Mac if you don't really have a drive name? It has to do with how you actually create the name of your particular storage disk on your laptop. For example, sometimes people might name a specific hard disk as one of the volumes, For instance, you can call the first hard disk as the backup volume and the second hard disk as the movie volume. So it's totally up to the user to configure these directory names on Mac in order to be able to differentiate between various storage devices. I'll wrap up this video here. In the next video, we'll start learning about various command names that you can use on the terminal.